So in this video, I'm going to talk about how we calculate the ROI of our agentic operating systems. We use a 6-step ROI calculation framework. Now, it kind of varies based on the use case, to be honest with you. But this is directionally correct on typically like what we do, right? And realistically, like we've started to do like these AI development blueprints prior to actually development because it just became like abundantly clear that we need to one like scope more accurately so we can quote more accurately on like how difficult this stuff actually is to build sometimes, and then two, like what is like the true value of the systems that we're building, and are we charging and pricing accordingly. Now, we don't want to go crazy, but there's certainly some times where like we totally undercharge. There's obviously 6 steps here. The first 4 are the main kind of meat and potatoes of it, and then cost, trends, and scaling, define success and decide. These are kind of like how do we say like, okay, the system's working or not, and then how do we make that decision, and then also what do things look like over time, right, if we project it out from a cost perspective as we scale. The case study that we're going to use in this case is a real one, right? A law firm that represents insurance companies. It's personal injury defense, about 33 people in size. We're specifically looking at the administrative function, like the legal assistant workflows, right? And so they have 6 of those. A lot of those workflows are like scheduling with opposing counsels, clients, and others, right? Ensuring everyone stays on deadline. There's a lot of like really clear, important like rules to follow. And like every court has their own kind of like calendar. Document generation, document filing, billing entry management. Some of these things are kind of tedious, but like super important for the firm. So step 1, current state analysis. First thing we want to do is get a handle on where are things at currently from a cost perspective in order to produce the outcomes that we're looking to replace here. Which roles are involved in ensuring the legal assistant workflows produce the required outcome. In this case, we have 2 roles, right? Legal assistant, which is very clear. By the way, calculating labor costs is step 1 and is probably the easiest thing to do and where most people stop, right? It's just like, are we cutting OpEx? Which, like, obviously, like, that's the point. We can't just stop there in terms of calculating ROI. Legal assistant, 6 people, $66K a year, right? We tacked on a 30% addition for benefits, which might be a little bit aggressive, but given this specific scenario, it made sense. Essentially, it costs $515,000 a year to support 6 legal assistants. And then paralegals step in when mistakes are made, right? Which is part of the reason why the system's getting built to begin with. Is like these paralegals are spending 5 to 10 hours a week stepping in to kind of like clean up messes or support or do rework or whatever, right? When the legal assistants, can't do it. We calculate that like, hey, typical rate, $45 an hour for a paralegal, which might be high if you're a paralegal watching this. We averaged, right? So there's some paralegals who've been there for like years, right? Who are making more than 90K, and then a lot that are making less. So the average was about 90K. And across all the paralegals, everybody, we basically calculated where it's like, hey, a quarter of a paralegal is spending time basically stepping in, right, to ensure things are, the outcomes are good. So total labor costs, we're looking at about $545,000. Key point, cost $515K to execute the legal assistant workflows for legal assistant salaries, an additional cost of about $30K when paralegals need to step in. And this is just a starting point, right? This is the easiest thing to calculate. A harder thing to calculate is inefficiencies. And it's hard because a lot of times there are just baked in, you kind of just see them as like cost of doing business, right? Like you can only expect a person to work 40 hours a week. You can expect them to work at a certain speed, at a certain pace for certain workflows, right? So there's no necessarily like expectation of like working extraordinarily fast, right? Because the technology hasn't existed. Now it does. And so now we can say like, okay, look, this is taking 5 hours, but our system can do it in 10 minutes. Technically, whatever you're doing now, because there's a tool out there that can do it way faster, 99% faster, there are inefficiencies, right? And we didn't even calculate that here. These are just inefficiencies in just the current state of things. So errors and mistakes, execution delays and missed deadlines, manual data entry, and then when the paralegal has to step in and fix it. When a paralegal has to step in, there's a lot of lost opportunities for them to do like other high value work on their cases. Paralegals, their time costs more. And so whenever they have to step in, it's tacking on costs, right? So a mistake costs more. And then we want to calculate the opportunity costs. Now, this is one that we are now starting to implement. You usually don't get to this point until you've actually truly mapped out what the system's going to B, but we obviously got to that point. You can either add it or you cannot add it because there are a lot of assumptions, right? So like if we increase capacity, what does that mean, right? If there's a 20% increase in capacity, what does that mean to the top line, right? Revenue. If we're working through cases a lot faster, what does that mean? Like quicker billing cycles? If clients are staying on longer, right? Because like we're assuming that the service gets better. People get responded to faster, right? They get the documents on time, all of that. If you win more cases, right? So we're saying, hey, legal assistant probably you can allocate about 5% out of the 100% of like, okay, this win, who is responsible for the fact that we won this case? We did a conservative like legal assistant is probably, you can allocate 5%. 24/7 after hours intake. That's actually kind of a big one because people just start calling attorneys and say, hey, are you available? Hey, are you available? Hey, can you represent me? Hey, can you represent me? If you don't answer the phone, you're not getting the business. Key point here is the true cost is about $1 million. And even if you took out the opportunity cost, the 370K in opportunity cost, you're still looking at about $200,000 in hidden costs. If you add it in there, you're looking at 570K of hidden costs, right? Which is pretty significant. But you're not going to see it. It's not money out the bank, right? It's just lost. Agentic OS opportunity analysis. So how much is this going to cost? And what are the ongoing costs after that? And then what are the expected returns, right? What are the improvements we're looking at? So calculating one-time implementation. Again, this is from the perspective of the client themselves, not us, not the people who are building it. The cost to them, our fee, 50K, right? Which is a discounted rate because we're going to own the IP. We're going to productize this thing. He didn't want to own IP, but he wanted to get a rev share. And basically in order to help us like develop this product, we offered a discount. Software migration. So they use a really old case management platform called Aderant Total Office. Looks like it's from the 90s. There's obviously no API connection. First thing that we did when we saw it was like, we need to do research and get them off of this thing. So we found Clio. They've signed up for Clio. It's going to cost $130 per seat, 33 people over 12 months, 50K about. And then they had like an add-on service to migrate the data. We actually, looking back, we probably should have just done it ourselves, but they had this as part of like their whole package. So it was like, yeah, why not? I mean, they know the Clio platform better than we do. Like, let's just speed it up. They ended up taking forever doing that. So next time we'll probably just do it ourselves. And the cost is going to end up being about 5 to 10K instead of 4 because it took so long. Infrastructure setup. So this is kind of these are the costs that we're bearing, right? To keep the system running and to make it so that the client just sees like one invoice a month or one invoice when it's time to pay, as opposed to like a bunch of line items of stuff, right? So in 8N, we're going to use like a free community version that we're self-hosting. Supabase, we're self-hosting. The server cost is going to be where the cost is going to fall to, which we're just estimating 5K. We don't know exactly. We don't have enough data yet to know what to expect from a usage perspective. Any additional tools, integrations obviously is included, integrating into Microsoft and Clio. UI is included, training and documentation, all that's included, right? Which you would expect. And then we have the LLMs. And this, the usage, man, I mean, there's tons of calculators out there to try to figure out like what your usage is going to be. It's difficult to even, it's difficult. If you're out there thinking like, oh man, I got to really figure out what potential usage costs are going to be, like clients keep asking, like most of the time it's very, very negligible. In this case, we put about 20K because there's a lot of document processing. There's a lot of tokens that are going to be coming in and out of this thing. And we put the popular models here to, indicate the price. What we probably will end up doing is pulling a model off of Hugging Face, an open source model, and hosting that ourselves because one, it'll be cheaper, and two, I just don't trust these guys. Like OpenAI, Google, like Anthropic. Sure, they don't train on our data when they're having their connectors or the MCPs going and crawling our stuff and pulling like our data off of like Google Drive or something. Like, sure, but they are grabbing our inputs into the chat and the output that it produces, right? That's exactly what they want. They want to see human queries and the output that it produces and whether or not the human thinks it's good. So that little thumb up, thumb down that nobody does, I guarantee there's some kind of algorithm that's like analyzing the conversation in the thread and trying to figure out the sentiment on whether or not it was a good response or not. So that way they can decrease the amount of tokens that are being outputted and just get to the answer like that the user wants like faster. So yeah, sure. You're not looking at like our data, but like you're looking at our data. Come on. So total initial investment, we're looking at 131K, which could be less if we host our own model. And so our 50K fee includes like development, integration, training, like research and vetting of a new case management platform. It includes like the UI component. It includes all of that, right, in the license. Ongoing costs. So our license, or not in the license, in the initial setup. Here's the license. So I threw up here 72K. We haven't obviously deployed it to other firms yet. Um, we were told, about 5K a month, maybe 75K, 7,500 a month is what firms would be willing to spend on this, especially because it's not replacing one legal assistant. It's supposed to take over the whole function of legal assistance. And so we were like, okay, a little bit higher than a typical legal assistant, but we're going to say, 5K a month for now. We'll see. Software licenses. Obviously, they have to keep paying for Clio, right? It's going to be 50K a year pretty much. LLM costs included, servers, all that included, maintenance monitoring included. And then we suggested like let's keep one, like your best legal assistant. Let's keep them on board, just in case. I mean, you never know. It's nice to have a human around. Like let's be honest. Total annual operating cost comes out to about 200K, right? 193. So the point is like this is a managed solution, which is like a term, managed solution, meaning we own the product and the IP 100%, and we license it back to the client, right, at a slightly higher rate than like the salary of one LA. Again, it's supposed to be doing the job of 6 plus, so slightly higher than like one LA salary. This client received a pretty large discount on the initial development, and then we wiped the first year licensing fees as well. Obviously, because there's like a little bit of R&D involved. They're the first client, right? It's not like an established product. This is a new thing entirely. But we get to keep the IP. We get to productize it later, right? So pretty good deal for us. We would have charged more if it wasn't the case. Benefit projections. So once we implement the system, what kind of like benefits are we supposed to get back from this thing? Cost reductions and productivity gains. Labor reduction, pretty easy, right? Salary reduction, definitely don't need 5 legal assistants anymore. So that's 330K gone, right, from your cost. Paralegal support reduction, even though you're not going to see it as a line item, that's still like time that costs money, right? And then process improvements. If we reduce the errors, if the execution time speeds up dramatically, what does that mean, right, from a value perspective? The error reduction one is the interesting one because some errors are like pretty devastating. Other errors are not so devastating. Key point, savings are calculated per legal assistant. The agentic system handles the workflows for at least 6 legal assistants. Obviously for process improvement, that is per legal assistant. I think salary reduction, we did it correct. That's 1 legal assistant. Revenue increases. This is also difficult for admin, administrative roles, operational roles. It's really hard to project like the revenue increase. But in this case, there's a couple of variables that we can pull in to be directionally correct. So capacity expansion, right? So accurate billing entries. This is one of the biggest ones because the client, for them, their clients are insurance companies. Those insurance companies are disputing every invoice they get, like every single one. It's like, hey, did you really spend an hour doing this? Did it really cost this to do that? And so if your billing entries are not accurate or they don't follow the right template or whatever, then they're going to dispute it. Even if you win that dispute and you push back, there's still like time and money involved and like fighting it. And then a lot of times they just don't pay you. Like it's just like, hey, this doesn't follow the framework. We're not going to pay, right? So there's a lot of lost money there. New case throughput. I think 20% increase in caseload is probably pretty aggressive. As I'm looking at this, like 20%, yeah, that's pretty aggressive. Win rate lift. Can we see a 5% increase in like win rate? Some of these I'm like, it would be cool, but like there's so many other variables involved in the win rate that it's like a client retention, 5% lower churn. If we could somehow attribute the legal assistants, what they do and how they do it to like client churn, which we're guessing, right? And these were numbers that were cross-checked with clients. So like, and then always on access. So if your client or somebody that you've worked with in the past, a firm is like calling their Rolodex of attorneys to like represent them on something and they need it quick and it's 2 a.m. and you're not going to answer the phone and you were the first call, you lose that business because they're going to call the next guy and the next guy's going to answer the phone. So 24 hour service, like being able to like schedule and triage things and uh, you know, answer inbounds, like that's huge. It's huge. So the key point is, like I said, calculating revenue increase for operations and admin roles is not very straightforward. Most of the numbers here are estimates, right? Educated guesses. But the system's going to execute legal assistant workflows faster, more accurately. That's true. It's going to work 24/7, and it's going to handle the job of at least 6 people. So like all of that stuff's true. And it should lead to, or it will lead to, an increase in capacity to take on more cases, more time for the attorneys and the paralegals to spend on cases, which means, ideally more cases are won, uh, which means that they should be getting more net new clients and return more existing clients as a result. Now we do the ROI calculation. So we've projected the benefits, we've projected the costs. Now we kind of figure out, okay, what is the return on investment over certain time horizons? So year one is the most important year to calculate. 12 to 18 months, that range, most important range to calculate. So total costs, you're going to take the initial plus the operating, obviously, add that up, you get the total, looking at about 330K. Net benefit minus costs, right? Benefit meaning like revenue. It's not just revenue, but it's also like, you've gotten time back, and we've translated that to a certain dollar amount, right? And so you add up those dollar amounts, and so that's the benefit. So you take your benefit, subtract that from the costs, you get about 430K, and then you get your ROI. Net benefit divided by total cost times 100, 131% ROI within the first year, right? Is the expectation. And then you could say like, man, that's like insane. Like there's not a lot of high ROI things that you can invest in to give you 131% the first year. Yeah, but there's not a lot of tools like AI that exist, right? Like that's the reason why people are freaking out about it, is because like it's very obvious, even if you just stopped at the OpEx decrease, like it's very obvious that ROI is going to be felt, assuming that it can produce like the same, if not better, outcome, right? At the end of the day, can't be a worse outcome in some cases. Payback period, monthly benefit about 35K, payback in 3.7 months. It says 8 to 9 month ramp up. Anyway, that's kind of like ramping up into like building it and then building out all the workflows, right? And adding workflow testing over time. Like it'll be deployed live with a certain capability set to begin with, and then improved. And so that's ramp up. Multi-year return. So now let's take that first year and try to project it over a 5-year time horizon. Things get hairy at year 3, right? Like you can see the benefits here are just like static. That's kind of like our one constant. Obviously the benefits are going to change over time, right? Like there's no way we could be completely accurate. I don't think I've ever seen a financial projection that has been accurate, like 100% accurate. The idea is to be directionally correct, conservatively directionally correct. And so year 1, we're obviously looking at 131 as the ROI. And then by year 5, we're looking at 2,200, right? So you can see how crazy this gets. And you're probably thinking, wow, that's too crazy. It's not actually, because the operating expense goes down over time. And even if you keep the benefit the same, the fact that the operating expenses are going down means that the ROI is going to increase, right? And we'll get into why operating expenses go down. Key point, ROI, total ROI is calculated by the cumulative net benefit divided by the initial investment, right? So the cumulative net benefit here, I'm pointing it like you guys can see that, but cumulative net benefit divided by initial investment, 131. Cost trends and scaling over time. So those first 4, like I said, are like the meat potatoes to find the ROI, right? This is to see, okay, if we project this out over time, where do we think the costs are going to be? And then what does scaling mean? Like economies of scale, but then also costs that you incur as you scale. So the LLM costs, OpenAI and Anthropic cut their usage costs, their like token prices by 50% in 1 year. I don't think that that's going to be like an ongoing trend of 50% cut. So we basically put 15% annual decline in those costs. And honestly, 50% is insane. It's basically tells you why they are so aggressively trying to capture the application layer. It's because their models aren't going to be worth anything. They're just a commodity at the end. Like The open source models they might be 2 years behind forever, but at a certain point they will be free. And you know, aside from like the usage, which you can host and pay for yourself, there's no tack on, right? There's no take. I think that they obviously can foresee that like the models themselves are going to have zero value, but like the applications that use the models will have value, right? Which is why Sam Altman and Johnny Ive are hugging each other on like promo videos, and Anthropic is doing their Claude Code and their projects and artifacts and stuff. It's the reason why they're trying to capture the application layer. Like that's the whole point, right? It's also why Sam Altman's doing like a hardware device. As cool as it is, and I'm a big hardware device guy as well. It's like clear that like it's going to be about expanding the scope of data that can be captured and ingested and processed by the LLMs. So like the more wearables we have, the more sensors that are out, the more data we can capture. Like that will be like the value, in addition to like the application layer where like users are using the models to do stuff, right? Models themselves worth nothing. Same workflow costs about 45% less by year 5. That's with our 15% annual decline. And then yeah, our model already baked it into the operating costs. That's why I said operating costs were going down. Scaling economics. So once we build the agentic OS, the foundation of the system, adding more workflows and capabilities is just a matter of like the usage costs, right? It's just like more tokens being processed. Obviously, every extra user you add to Clio is going to be an additional $130 a month, right? And then the platforms, this is how you get the economies of scale. Like N8N, Supabase, all the tools that we're using, even the models, like they the costs scale sublinearly, meaning like every additional unit of costs is smaller each time you add it on. And this is sublinearly, right? It's not like exponentially getting smaller, like it's a curve, right? It's just like it's just a line. And that means like all of these savings flow to EBITDA, right? It just means like margins increase. So the cost that it takes to do something is this, right? And then every time you're doing something, the cost goes down. You do it again, cost goes down, cost goes down. Like the rate of growth on the costs is decreasing, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Basically just means your margins expand. 5-year cost benefit curve. So how the ROI compounds over time. And it does start to compound. So you see we have traditional costs, right? Traditionally, the costs are going to scale over time because you need to add more headcount. There's usually more benefits, right? People's salaries need to grow, at least at the rate of inflation. I mean, that'd be cool, but at least at the rate of inflation, people get whatever, right? There's all kinds of costs associated with scaling a company traditionally. Then we have the AI costs, which we are showing decreasing pretty significantly because we think that the technology is going to be a lot cheaper. And so those costs will decline, which means the savings increase, which means your cumulative ROI increases over time, right? And once it gets to these like multi-thousand numbers, you start to just like, man, is this even realistic? The thing is, it is realistic, which is why everyone's freaking out about all this stuff, because it's crazy. Yeah, traditional costs grow about 5% per year, salaries and benefits. AI operating costs fall about 15% per year. Cumulative ROI is total net savings divided by the initial spend, which was 131. And so obviously like by year 3, it's exceeding 100% of cumulative ROI, right? Pretty crazy. Define success and decide. So you might think like, oh, okay, like year 3 over 1,000%, year 1 131%, like it's a done deal. Go. It was a done deal, but I'm about to show you why that's not always the case. So a super important thing to do is to figure out whether or not this thing is actually providing the returns you expect by being very clear on what those KPIs are going to be. For example, if you take an SDR, a team of SDRs, 10 SDRs, and or appointment setters. And like inbound leads come in, they got to call those leads and they got to convert them from like warm to like a booked call. And there's like an expected conversion rate there, right? So it's like, hey, you guys don't necessarily have the power over like how many inbound leads come in, but like the conversion rate must be like 80%. From like warm lead, they entered the lead form to booked call for the sales executive to like hop on the call and try to close them. It's like, okay, cool. Now let's say we implement an agentic system that has a conversion rate of 70%, right? Or 65%. So it's obviously worse than what the human SDR is, but it makes up for it by calling people a lot faster, following up a lot more frequently and diligently, being available to call leads at any time, right? Any day. And so you can see that simply by doing a lot of those intangibles could increase the actual top line revenue at the end of the day, could increase the total number of booked meetings at the end of the day, even if the conversion rate is lower. And so if you're looking at a KPI, it's not always going to be one-to-one the KPIs that you look at with your human team and the KPIs you look at with your system, right? Because quality might decrease, but if you can make up for it with volume, it might be totally worth it, right? So like make sure that the KPI you're looking at is the right one to look at, right? Like what's the ultimate goal here? Is the ultimate goal like top line revenue? Is the ultimate goal like margin increase? Like, are we trying to decrease OpEx? What is the ultimate goal? And then how can we judge the system on whether or not it's getting there? In this case, it was cost savings, right? What are the cost savings over time? What are the productivity gains over time? What's the revenue growth over time? That third one is kind of like we're not too worried about that third one, but we do want to see those numbers, right? So we can come back here and say, hey, we saw this revenue growth, right? When you look at month 3 to month 6, the jump is pretty steep. I might have to look at the math, what's going on there. Anyway, the key point is 100% realization in the first year, right? Technically 9 months, technically 8 months, actually. Yeah, if you do the math, it's probably actually 8 months. Decision-making framework, right? Should you actually do it or not? Because all of them are going to say you're going to get ROI because OpEx is going to be slashed, right? The labor costs are going to be cut, so it's going to say, hey, this is positive ROI. But, you want to be smart about it. So there's probably about 4 checks here in this checkbox, which is like, are you going to see the ROI in year 1? Yes, but like how much of it are you going to see? Is it going to be 100% or is it going to be like 2, right? It's a go if it's greater than 75 in year 1. Payback period. Are you going to get paid back on your investment within the first year, right? If it is within the first year, it's a go for sure. For sure go. Another one that that I think is really important is, can the AI actually like reliably execute the workflows? Because if it cannot, then the cost of like dealing with those mistakes or complexities or the habit change of like an employee that's like a whole job is to like keep this thing, on track, is going to end up costing more, right? And then success. Can you actually clearly define success? Or is this going to be like, a marketing team for like Geico, where it's like, are you guys actually, what value are you actually doing it? Or are you just kind of like checking off, a bunch of boxes? Like, yeah, we did our Super Bowl ad. Yeah, we did this ad. Yeah, we had this brochure. We did this event. Like, or are you guys actually, is there ROI here, right, with the marketing team? Caution, obviously, you can play with these numbers, but for us, it's like, okay, the ROI is between 30 to 75% within the first year. They're likely going to get paid back within 18 months. Some of these processes are pretty complex to handle. So instead of like doing 90, 95% of the function, we're really looking at like 60%, 50% of the function. And then success is kind of like a it when you see it type of thing. These admin roles, these operating roles are very much feel like it when you see it, right? Which it's a challenge to put numbers to it, because then you start feeling like you're making stuff up. And then stop when ROI is below 30%. You're not going to get paid back for 18 plus months. Again, this is for like mid markets and SMBs. Like if you're an enterprise, obviously the decisions you make are over a 3 to 5 year time horizon, and so there's a little bit different calculus happening here on whether or not you make that decision. Can the AI technology do it, right? If it cannot, don't do it a majority of the workflows. And then if you cannot clearly define success, I wouldn't do it. Even if all the other things are green, let me not say that. Because there are some cases where you do. If it's like an assistant type deal, if it's just like a RAG function or like a search, right? So real result summary. Obviously, the decision was a go. Reduced team overhead by about 84%. Missed deadlines went down to almost like, there's almost like no missed deadlines, but I'm not going to put 100%. Execution accuracy went up to 95%, like went up by 95%. Almost zero mistakes. Paralegals are no longer spending 5 hours a week. Our conservative ROI is 124%, or was. Actual is 254, right? And you always want to be conservative. Key takeaways. Total cost is much more than just salaries and payroll. Don't stop at simply the labor costs, or the operating costs. Look at those hidden inefficiencies, right? How much is that actually costing you? And if you can, look at the opportunity cost, right? If you don't do this thing, how much is it costing you? Seriously, because everybody's going to do it at some point. Eventually, that opportunity cost starts to grow and get much, much larger, right? And that net benefit starts to decline because now you're competing against people who have this stuff. Like now is the time. Anyway, ROI compounds over time, right? Start at 131%, increases to 2200 within 5 years. And then I would always model things conservatively from an ROI perspective because there's a lot of assumptions being made and you just don't want to be crazy about any of this stuff. It's already crazy. You don't need to be even crazier. And then find the flywheel. So as you're doing this stuff and you're learning about the current workflows and how much it costs and who all has to get involved in this stuff and all this, right? It starts to become like pretty clear what are the biggest bottlenecks. But the biggest bottlenecks aren't always the biggest cost drivers, right? You could have a functioning workflow that's producing really good results and reliable and you like it a lot and it just works, right? And you're not thinking like, oh man, this is such a huge pain point. I really need an agentic system to replace what I have going on right now. You're not thinking that because it's like working. But the reality is like, if you could reduce the cost by like 90%, the cost it takes to produce the same outcome by 90%, then you will feel higher ROI, right? By implementing the system in that workflow that's like working. And it's usually those workflows where the costs, like as you're scaling, the costs rise sublinearly. So like each unit of cost, decreases. The rate of growth of the cost is decreasing every time. And then the returns could rise exponentially. Now, it's hardly ever exponential, but when you start to think about the growth capital that you get, the EBITDA margin, the EBITDA increase, right? Like the capital that you have left over to reinvest back into the business, that's where you start to see like, oh, okay, this is where things could actually get exponential. But yeah, you could reach like pretty significant economies of scale inside your current operations if you go after the right function, right? And all of that stuff all that cash generated, right? That extra cash could be reinvested into building other agentic operating systems for the other parts of the business, right? And that's it, right? That's our ROI calculation. I'll likely look back on this video in a few months and think, man, that was so rudimentary. But anyway, I built this little thing, little page. You can go click the link down in the description to access it. It allows you to kind of like quickly put together an ROI calculation. So I just had random, right? Department, function name, process description. So this would be like administration. This would be like legal, or this could be like legal assistant. This could be scheduling, document management, billing entries, etc. Operational costs that are not FTE, meaning like full-time employee. Then you want to talk about each of the workflows that they're doing. So again, I just random letters, but this would be like scheduling with opposing counsels, document management, billing entries, all the things that I mentioned, hours spent, how many employees are involved in like producing the outcome here, managing that process, and then what is like the average cost per employee, right? And then what is the error rate? This isn't done, by the way. Like I'm going to clean this. It might look a little bit different by the time you guys get it because this is a weird like dark to light. It should be opposite. Anyway, if you can't tell, it's Lovable. Shout out Lovable. And then the expected state. So we'll pull over like everything you put for the current and have you put in like what is the expected outcome. Now, if you haven't talked to a team who builds these systems and can basically tell you like, hey, this is the volume that you can expect. Here's how long it'll likely take with an agentic system doing it as opposed to a person or a team. Make your best guess. Ask ChatGPT, I guess. Yeah. And that's it. And then you hit calculate ROI. And then you get this nice little dashboard showing up here. It's got your 5-year projection, your current state breakdown, tells you where you break even, right? What your payback period is going to be. This thing needs a little bit of work before it's ready to go, but by the time you guys see this, it will be ready. Feel free to get in here, play with it, figure out what your expected ROI is going to be for an agentic operating system. If you've talked to us and you're wondering that, hop in here and fill this stuff out, and you should be able to get a nice little number at the end. But that's it, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to join the community, hop in the webinars, read Ross's newsletter. We're pumping out a bunch of stuff, bunch of content, getting back on the YouTube grind. I think it's going to be an exciting back half of 2025 for Custom AI Studio, I will say. All right, y'all.